This video critically analyzes psychologist Daryl Bem's article Feeling the Future, Experimental Evidence for Anomalous Retroactive Influences on Cognition and Affect. Specifically, issues in regard to research design, statistical methodology, and replication issues will be addressed. One of Bem's main design problems is that the sample size per experiment, which ranges from 50 to 200, might have not been large enough to capture true population parameters. Another related problem raised by Wagenmarcus et al. Is that Bem varies the sample size used from experiment to experiment. This suggests that participants might have been adjusted to achieve statistical significance.
Another pitfall in terms of design is the fact that for certain experiments there are no control groups, such as in experiments 2 and 7. A control group is the sample subsection to which no treatment is allocated. Including a control group is good scientific practice because the inferred effect is calculated as the difference in the dependent variable between the treated and the control groups. Furthermore, in experiment 1, Bem decides what observations to include in the control group only after discovering that no side effect is found for some of them. He only determines the control group midway through. A further limitation raised by Wagenmarcus et al. Is that Bem uses one-sided p-values. A p-value is the probability that, if the null hypothesis is true, one finds sample statistics as different or more from what was hypothesized. The p-value is the probability of a type 1 error, i.e., a false positive. When one uses one-sided tests or p-values, one restricts the sign of the alternative hypothesis by imposing one's theoretical expectations. This halves p-values and makes it seem that the effect found is significant. Indeed, when using two-sided p-values, some of Bem's experiments cease to be significant. Using one-sided tests is legitimate when one's theoretical expectation is very strong, but it seems inappropriate in studying psi. Since psi effects are poorly understood, one cannot impose that the time-reversed psi effect will have the same sign as the corresponding psychological effect.
Additionally, Wagenmarcus et al. Criticized that Bem performs exploratory analysis, but claims to be engaging in confirmatory analysis. In exploratory analysis, one looks for patterns in the data and tries different hypotheses, often running many statistical tests and changing procedures once the experiment has started. On the other hand, confirmatory analysis states a hypothesis as well as the methods to test it before the experiment starts and keeps them unchanged throughout. Although empirical analysis can greatly benefit from data exploration, confirmatory analysis is required to prove a causal effect. This is because if one reports some tests but not others without accounting for having run many tests, the study suffers from the file drawer effect or publication bias, and the p-values overestimate the effect's significance. For instance, if one performs 20 tests, one would expect that by chance alone one turns out significant at 5% level. If only one reports that test, one must account for the fact that extra disconfirming tests were carried out. And both Chambers and Francis suggest that Bem carries out tests that he does not report. For example, in experiment 1, he tests for psi effect with several kinds of pitches, but only reports the results that turn out significant, i.e. those for erotic pitches. Indeed, Bem acknowledges his experimental design required extensive pilot testing, undergoing numerous instances of trial and error, but we do not know exactly how many extra tests were run that are not reported.
Another key issue is whether Bem's findings replicate. This essential step in the scientific method is especially pressing here, given that, as Weissman and Slicht found, whether a study finds psi depends on whether the experimenter believes in psi. Many replication studies on Bem's experiments have actually failed. For instance, Richte, Weissman, and French, and Galek et al. Failed to replicate experiments 8 and 9. Similarly, Traxler et al. Failed to replicate the effect of retroactive priming, Bem's experiments 3 and 4. For the issues we have discussed, further studies following more rigorous statistical practices would be needed to prove the existence of psi effects.